Hello friends, today we're going to be talking about air, the activator of our vitality. So vitality means energy, being active. So air actually activates us. So you are probably familiar with the acronym NEW START, where N stands for nutrition, E exercise, W water, S sunshine or sunlight, T temperance, A air, R rest, and T trust in God. So these are our natural doctors, our natural remedies, our God-given remedies. And of these 8, we are going to be talking about air. Air is the greatest blessing, one of the greatest blessings that God has given us for free. And imagine it's for everyone, whether righteous or wicked, everyone has access to this precious blessing. But we seldom appreciate it. They say a miracle repeated ceases to be a miracle. And the greatest things on earth, they're actually for free. Think about it. You cannot last 4 minutes without air. Wow. So it's actually one of the greatest blessings that God has given us. So today we'll talk about the composition of air. What makes up air? We'll also talk about its importance. Why is it so important? Why is it that you cannot last without it? Then we will also talk about how to breathe. So we realize that one of the greatest hindrances to the utilization of this great gift is actually improper breathing. We have become a nation of improper breathers, if I may say. So we'll also talk about how to breathe, and then we'll talk about effects of oxygen deprivation, and lastly we'll touch a little on air pollution. So let's get started. So in Ministry of Healing, page 127, it says pure air, sunlight, abstemiousness, rest, exercise, proper diet, the use of water, trust in divine power. These are the true remedies. So God is saying that the above listed are the true remedies. So we may have any other remedy, but apart from this, we do not have true remedies. So it's interesting to note that none of these things are for sale. You cannot go to the store to buy any of this. You cannot go to the store to buy pure air. Neither can you go there to buy sunlight, or rest, or exercise, or proper diet, or the use of water. These are free gifts that God has given to us. So one may live for weeks without food, or for days without water, but deprived of air, he will perish within minutes. So you can last for a bit long without food and even without water, but you cannot last long without air. So air is very important for our survival. So in order for us to live, we need air, not necessarily pure air, but just air. But if we want to live a quality life, a healthy life, then we need pure air. Unfortunately, we live in days where pure air is a treasure. It's hard to come by. We live in the cities where there is pollution from cars, from factories, and even from smokers, other people So pure air has really become a rare treasure, but by God's grace I pray that we may be able to understand its importance and how we can manage the environment around us so that we can regain this precious treasure. So let's move on. So we'll now talk about the importance of air. So air is actually a mixture of gases. So it's not just oxygen. So it consists of 78% nitrogen, consists of 20% oxygen, and 0.9% argon. And the rest are other gases like carbon dioxide, helium, and hydrogen. So God in his wisdom made air to have 20% oxygen. Otherwise, if it was 100% oxygen, when you light a candle, the whole world would burst and be on fire. So it's actually a blessing that we have 20% of oxygen. But you need to take note that when you breathe in air, you do not use all of them. Nitrogen is inert, which means it's unreactive at room temperature. So you will not utilize this. And you only make use of oxygen. But of course, not all of it. And then the body uses oxygen to get energy from the food we eat. And this is known as cellular respiration. So we all know that we get energy from food, but how do we get energy from food? It's through the cellular respiration, where food combines with oxygen to release energy. So it's actually similar to burning wood. So when you're burning wood, the carbon will combine with oxygen to give carbon dioxide and energy in the form of heat. But in the case of cellular respiration, the energy is actually chemical energy, right? So oxygen combines with our food in a process called respiration, and we get carbon dioxide and what? And energy, chemical energy. So how does the body get this oxygen? So we breathe in air, which has oxygen in it. Then the blood will pick up oxygen from the lungs and transports it to the tissues, right? And in the tissues, that's where energy is produced from respiration. There's always carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide is then carried from the what? From the tissues or from the body cells to the lungs, where it is expelled out when we exhale. So almost all of the oxygen we need comes from green plants through a process called photosynthesis. So I'm sure we're familiar with this photosynthesis. So through this process, plants make what? Oxygen. So through the same process of photosynthesis, plants use up what? Carbon dioxide. So we live for each other. The plants give us oxygen, we give them carbon dioxide. So it's actually a law in nature. Nothing lives for itself. But sadly, only the selfish human heart lives for itself. Otherwise, everything else in the ecosystem, everything else in the universe lives for something else. So as a true Christian, you should remember that you don't live for yourself, right? You don't live for yourself. So did you know that 1 acre of trees produces enough oxygen to keep 18 people alive for a year? So as good stewards, we must make sure that we grow more trees, we don't unnecessarily chop down woods, and let's maintain our environment, because As I've said, nothing lives for itself. We give up carbon dioxide and the plants give up oxygen. And so we live for each other. So let's take care of our environment. As we take care of it, it also will take care of us. So without oxygen, cells can function for a limited period. So we have discussed that oxygen combines with food to give us energy, which is in the form of chemical energy, and body cells constantly require that energy for survival. So without oxygen, cells will not be able to function. They can only function for a limited period. So long-term depletion of oxygen will lead to cell death and eventually will lead to the death of the what? Of the organism. So if you deprive someone of oxygen for some time, within minutes, that person will die, because our cells can only function for a limited period without what? Without oxygen. So when doing a first aid, the first thing that you should check for is the airway, because once the airway is not correct, then survival is compromised. So whenever maybe someone is collapsed, you must make sure that they are breathing and that their airway is unblocked. So one of the most life-saving techniques every individual should learn is how to do a CPR, as it can make a life or death difference to someone's life. So what is a CPR? It simply means cardiopulmonary resuscitation. So this is when let's say someone is collapsed, they've had a heart attack and they are no longer breathing. So you are now doing chest compressions so that you maintain blood supply to the brain, because once blood supply stops to the brain, the cells begin to die due to oxygen deficiency. So as I've said, you cannot survive without oxygen. So CPR is very critical and very life-saving. When someone is collapsed, every minute counts, every second counts. So you must make sure that the CPR is done without interruption. Otherwise, long-term depletion of oxygen will lead to cell death, and then eventually the person will die. This is just a side note, so that you just appreciate how important air is for us. So what's the best air to breathe? Yeah, that's very important. So you need to know that the best air which one needs to breathe is one which is rich in oxygen. So it's not necessarily 100% oxygen. That will actually be toxic for you. But the best air is that which is rich in oxygen, naturally rich in oxygen, and is negatively charged. So negatively charged air is usually located near waterfalls and rivers due to their movement, as well as beaches, forests, mountains, and areas that have just been struck by lightning. So what does it mean to be negatively charged? So whenever an element gains an electron, it becomes negatively charged. When it loses an electron, it becomes positively charged. So negatively charged air is located near waterfalls because the waters are constantly brushing each other or hitting each other. So this makes the air negatively charged. So you will notice that from the above, we can see that the places with the best air, they are in the wild and are natural. The beaches, the forest, the mountains, and areas that have just been struck by lightning. So these are all natural areas in the world, which suggests that in order to get the best air, we must live in the wild and natural areas, or maybe perhaps go there often, right? In order to get the best air. So the best air is actually outdoors and not indoors. So the negative ions can be referred to as happy ions. Why? Because they contribute to better mood, energy, and an overall sense of well-being. If you have ever been to a river or a waterfall, you can testify that whenever you go there, you have a better mood. You are suddenly energetic. You feel happier than before. This is due to the negative ions. So once in the bloodstream, the negative ions are believed to produce biochemical reactions that will increase your levels, the levels of the mood chemical, which is called serotonin. And serotonin helps to alleviate depression. So it also relieves stress and boosts your daytime energy. So whenever you go to a waterfall or near the river, you realize that all of a sudden you become high and happy. And it is all due to these negative ions. So when you are stressed out and having a hard day, it's good to take a walk if there's a forest nearby or a park. You realize that you can change your mood to a better mood just by walking in a forest or close to the river. Then studies show that people who spend more time in outdoor natural environments are actually less likely to be depressed. They sleep better and have more energy. But on the other hand, people who spend more time indoor are more likely to be depressed. They have difficulties in sleeping and have less energy. So if you are depressed, or you know someone who's depressed, suggest that they spend more time in outdoor natural environments, as this will elevate and change their mood. So no wonder God placed Adam in a garden at the end of creation. So the ideal home for men was in the what? Or is in the garden. That's where men can function optimally, right? So now we'll have an overview of the respiratory system. So what is the respiratory system? That's the system which functions to take in air and to take in oxygen and give out what? Carbon dioxide. So we normally breathe through the nose and the mouth. So when you breathe in air, it passes down the pharynx, down to the larynx, and down the windpipe or the trachea, and then to the lungs. So these are our lungs. We have two lungs in our chest cavity. So we have the bronchus, with which further divides into smaller bronchioles, and then finally we have these small sacs which are called the alveoli, right? So this is the general structure of the respiratory system. So when you breathe in air, it moves down to the what? To the air sacs, where gaseous exchange occurs. So it's important to note that there is a large blood supply to the what? To the lungs. This facilitates for what? For gaseous exchange. So the air sacs or the alveoli, they are aligned with capillaries and facilitates for gaseous exchange. And I want you to pay close attention with this muscle. It's not clearly shown in this picture, but it's called the diaphragm. That's the primary key muscle for respiration. So whenever you breathe in, it will move down, creating a larger cavity or space for the lungs to expand. And when you breathe out, it will move up to become more dome-shaped so that air is forced out. So this is actually the primary key for what? For respiration. And we are supposed to use that mainly for breathing. And then in this picture, we'll see that the respiratory system is closely connected or linked to the cardiovascular system, which is the blood system. So this is our heart, and this is the right side of the heart, and this is the left side of the heart. So this is blood. This in blue is blood, which is low in oxygen. So it is pumped from the right side of the blood to the lungs. So in the lungs, it will pick up oxygen and then is pumped back to the left side of the heart, where it is pumped to the rest of the body. So now it's full of oxygen. It is pumped to the rest of the body, to the liver, to the stomach, to the kidneys, to every single tissue in the body, and to the brain as well. See? So in the tissues, that's where cellular respiration occurs, as we have discussed. So energy is produced from burning food with what? With oxygen, and as a result, carbon dioxide is produced. So when blood is coming back from the tissues, it now is low oxygen and a higher concentration in carbon dioxide. So it then goes back to the right side of the heart, and then back to the lungs, where it collects oxygen, comes back to the left side of the heart, and the cycle what? Continues. So if we want to have good blood, we must breathe well, because the two systems are what? Are connected. They are connected. If you fail to breathe well, you don't deep breathe, or you don't breathe to your lung capacity, then it means the oxygen supply to the rest of the body is also compromised. And remember, we have said that oxygen is very crucial for the survival of cells. So if there is low oxygen supplied to the body tissues, they will also function minimally, right? So if you want to have the best optimal function of body tissues, then you must also have a good supply of oxygen. So if you want to have good blood, we must breathe well. And remember, the life of a person is in the what? In the blood, right? So breathing is a natural and spontaneous automatic activity. There is never a time, of course, okay, generally you don't think that you want to breathe. Even now, before I mentioned this, you were not thinking about breathing, you were just breathing, right? Of course, there is a voluntary part of breathing, but normally we don't think about breathing, we just breathe. So we take in approximately 20,000 liters of air daily, and there are about 600 million air sacs or alveoli where gaseous exchange takes place, and we've already talked about it. Gaseous exchange is when we are the blood is releasing carbon dioxide from the tissues and taking up oxygen from the lungs or the alveoli. So this all takes place in the what? In the air sacs, which are also known as alveoli. So the alveoli are closely connected to the circulatory system, as we have seen, and this makes it possible for gaseous exchange to take place. So low oxygen blood is carried to the lungs, where it picks up oxygen and releases carbon dioxide, and this exchange occurs within milliseconds. And should remember that oxygen rich blood is actually bright red. So the color of your blood will show whether it's oxygen rich or it's not. So now we'll talk about how to breathe. So the simple answer would be like a sleeping child or like a child. So if you have ever looked at how a child breathes, you will notice that they all breathe from the belly and not the chest. So when they are breathing, you can see their belly rising and falling and not the chest. And this is actually the more normal way of breathing. So somehow when a child is younger, like below 5 years of age, they breathe this way. But as they start going to school, where they sit a lot, and now I have these activities which constrict their chest, they become more chest breathers. So everything else in nature, or in nature that breathes, actually breathes from the belly. If you see how your cat breathes, how the fish breathes, how your dog breathes, they all breathe from the belly. But it's only us human beings we have adopted this chest breathing. So it's actually interesting to note that chest breathing is actually a way we react to stress. So we're supposed to only breathe using our chest. Like the chest was supposed to, we're just supposed to be chest breathers when we are reacting to stress, like when we're in the fight or flight mode, when you just want a fast supply of oxygen to the body and to the brain, right? But now we are now more of chest breathers, so we are somehow always in the fight or the flight mode, and that is just not right. So because we are bombarded by many stressors all day, most people have become chest breathers. So maybe a fight or flight mode was just supposed to come when you're having a life-threatening issue, like perhaps you are being chased by a lion, or you are being chased by a dog, something like that. That's when we're supposed to chest breathe. That's when we're supposed to have a fight or flight mode. But nowadays, we have this fight or flight mode as a result of, like, you get a message, a text message, or an email, or a WhatsApp. We are constantly bombarded by many stressors all day, such that most people have just become chest breathers. So if you're not familiar with belly breathing, you can try sitting on a chair, lean forward, place your elbows on your knees, and when you try to breathe naturally in this position, you are forced to do belly breathing. So that's how belly breathing will feel like. So during abdominal breathing or belly breathing, the stomach and not the chest should rise and fall during inhalation and exhalation respectively. So now I want you to take a deep breath. All right, so when you were taking this deep breath, did you feel like you're getting taller or your chest was rising? If you felt that, then you are breathing the wrong way. So that is actually called chest breathing or vertical breathing, where you feel taller when you breathe in. So the normal way, or the proper way of breathing, should be abdominal breathing or horizontal breathing. So it's your abdomen and not your chest that should rise whenever you breathe, just like in a sleeping child. So this is no longer normal for us to do abdominal breathing, so it actually comes with practice. So I suggest that if you want to regain this correct way of breathing, you have to start practicing doing deep breaths each and every day, each and every time, and make sure that it's your stomach and not the chest that's rising. And for breathing, a good posture is key. So as I've mentioned earlier, the diaphragm is actually the primary key for breathing. So in order for us to use the diaphragm in breathing, it has to be in a mechanically optimal position. So with wrong posture, when it's not in a mechanically optimal position, we cannot use the diaphragm, but rather we use other things. We use our accessory muscles for breathing. So that's when we now start to use our neck muscles to breathing. And when we use those muscles, they are not supposed to be used normally. So the breathing becomes shallower when we use those muscles. So it's important to maintain a good posture. So think about it this way: you want to blow up a balloon, and whilst pressing on it, it's quite difficult, right? So that's the same thing with your lungs. If you want to, you're trying to inflate them and yet compressing them at the same time, so you cannot get the full lung capacity. So in order to breathe maximally, to have the fullest lung capacity, you need to be in a good posture. So head should be up, back straight, shoulders straight, chest out, abdomen in, and the pelvis should be flattened. So always remember, a good posture is key if you are to have proper breathing, and if you are to use your diaphragm, which is the primary key muscle for breathing, right? So what does good respiration do for you? So firstly, it promotes good digestion. So shallow breathing when allows only little blood flow to other organs. So blood flow to other organs like the gut is compromised with shallow breathing. So when you have compromised blood flow to other organs, it means the cells, they are not getting enough oxygen and they cannot function optimally, right? And it's also deep breathing is important to facilitate the transportation of blood from the gut to the liver. So you notice after a big meal or after a meal, your blood is loaded with nutrients and it needs assistance for it to be transported back to the heart. So when you deep breathe, you are assisting your blood to be transported to the heart. So just a simple act of deep breathing will promote good digestion. So could it be that we have digestive issues just because we are failing to breathe? Yeah. So secondly, good respiration will induce sound sleep. Yes. So deep breathing has a relaxing effect. I'm sure you have heard people saying that when you want to get into an exam or any stressful situation, or you're about to do a presentation in front of many people, they tell you to deep breathe. How does that work? So deep breathing has a relaxing effect to the body. So when you're failing to fall asleep, deep breathe. This will have a relaxing effect to the body and it will help you fall asleep easily. And in connection with that, deep breathing also reduces stress. So when you deep breathe, you stimulate your vagus nerve, which is a nerve that extends from your brain to your chest and to the abdomen. So whenever it is stimulated, it switches your body to the relaxing position, or the relaxation response. So you are now in the relaxed state. So in the relaxed state, your heart rate is reduced, your blood pressure is reduced, and this also lowers your stress levels. So over time, belly breathing can help you to cope with stress so that you are less sensitive to stress triggers. So if you become more of a belly breather, you will be able to cope with stress better. So another thing, could it be that these days we are more stressed because we are failing to breathe well? It's interesting. Deep breathing also assists in the return of blood to the heart by creating a negative pressure in the chest, thereby helping to decongest the brain, thus reducing the likelihood of a headache. So when you deep breathe, you create a negative pressure in the chest, and this helps blood flow back to the heart, right? So when blood flow to the heart is enhanced, it means you are decongesting blood from your brain. So headaches are sometimes due to congestion of blood in the brain. So when you are using your brain a lot and you're overthinking, more blood flow will go to the brain so that you have more activity, and this will cause headaches. But if you want to decongest the heart, the brain, then you need to make the blood flow away from the brain, and this can be achieved by deep breathing, which assists the return of blood to the heart, right? So just a simple act of deep breathing can actually reduce your likelihood of a headache. Then, do you have difficulty in going to sleep at night? We have already mentioned about this. You can simply try to deep breathe. Make sure there is a current of air coming into your room. Your room should be comfortable and not chilling, but with some fresh air circulating through it. Relax as you lay there. Give your life anew into the hands of God. Then slowly take several deep breaths, holding each one a moment before exhaling it. So when you now let your mind slow down, your thoughts are upon God, the peace of being with Him, and the need for deep, full breathing. Very soon you'll be sound asleep. So whenever you're having a difficulty in going to sleep, just try deep breathing and relax, and place your life in the hands of God, and you realize that you will soon be sound asleep. So that's a good way of falling asleep instead of counting sheep. So now we talk about the effects of oxygen deprivation. So when you are deprived of oxygen, it's not only the lungs that suffers, but the brain, the stomach, the liver, and everywhere else in the body will be affected by impure air. So the skin will become sallow, the digestion is retarded, the heart is depressed, the brain is clouded, and your thoughts become confused. So you should also notice that the brain cells are the most sensitive to oxygen deficiency. So whenever you have a change, or even the slightest change in oxygen concentration, the first cells that report or notice this change are the brain cells. So that's why you notice that you can become gloomy and depressed in ill ventilated areas. So if you want to keep your students alert and awake, or if you yourself want to keep alert and awake, you must make sure that you are in a well ventilated area. This will keep you alert. Then this is a table that shows us the effects of oxygen deprivation. So the typical oxygen concentration in air is around 21%, and at this level you can function optimally. But as the oxygen concentration in air decreases, your probability of cell death also increases. And you see, like when it's 4 to 6% oxygen, a coma in 40 seconds, convulsions, respiration ceases, and even death. So that's why you have heard of people who have died climbing the high mountains. It's because the higher you go, the lesser the oxygen concentration. So the oxygen concentration becomes insufficient for survival. So hence people who die. So that's why they carry oxygen tanks with them, right? Then in the sick room. So since a lack of fresh air can cause sickness, it is therefore very important that fresh air be supplied to the ill so that they can become well, right? So in the care of the sick, it is very important that there is plenty of fresh air in the room. If you have a patient at home, a sick relative or friend, make sure that their room is well ventilated. However, most people don't like this. They want a warm room, and they generally close windows and it's dark in there. But this is actually not good for the patient. So you have to make sure that the room is well lit and there's plenty of fresh air. And if it's not possible to open the window whilst the patient is in there, you can take them out, well ventilate the area and bring them back in. And it is actually better for you to put on more clothing and open the window than to close the window, because you are now depriving yourself of pure air to breathe. So those who are aged, infirm, or invalid also have a very definite need of fresh, pure air to breathe. So if you have someone who cannot go outside on their own, then you need to assist them so that they can have pure, fresh air to breathe for themselves from the outside. So now we'll talk about good habits for healthier breathing. So you should open your bedroom windows. If possible, sleep with your window open. Because sometimes we wake up not having fully rested because we have been breathing stale air throughout the night. So if it's possible, then you should sleep with your bedroom windows open. And you should also go outdoors as much as possible. And this has been quite difficult for most people during this pandemic time. And I'm sure it has contributed also to the negative mood and attitudes related with the pandemic, because people spend most time in the outdoors and are deprived of fresh air. But if you want to maintain your mood and not to be gloomy, then I suggest that you should go outdoors as much as possible. So colder weather may require additional clothing. I'm sure most people don't like to go out when it's super cold. You just want to stay indoors, but you still need pure fresh air. So when it's cold, you can put on more clothing and go outside. You need the fresh air. And also always keep proper ventilation in mind, whether at church or at school or in the combi. I know there are some people who prefer the window to be closed, but in such a congested area like the combi, you definitely need to have your window open. Yeah, of course you have to respect other people's wishes, but if possible, have the windows open. And as well, avoid people who smoke. Only stay with smokers long enough to help them, and wherever possible, try to avoid people who smoke, because passive smoking is actually more dangerous. And also practice belly breathing daily throughout the day until it becomes more of a habit. So you should practice belly breathing daily throughout the day. And exercise is the key to full utilization of our lungs. So if you want to fully expand your lungs to its maximum capacity, then you need to exercise. So which means exercise. You see, these remedies, they work together. You go outside, you get fresh air, you are exercising, and then there's also sunlight. So you get all of the benefits in just one activity. And another thing that is important that we have discussed is you should maintain a good posture. So constriction of the thoracic cavity or the chest cavity by poor posture will limit your lung volume. So you should make sure that you are always in a good posture. And lastly, we'll talk about air pollution. So what is it? Air pollution refers to the release of pollutants into the air that are detrimental to human health and the planet as a whole. Unfortunately, we live in times when there is more air pollution day by day. So sources of air pollution can be gases from vehicles, from factories, could be dust, white spores, even from volcanoes and wildfires. And pollutants can cause respiratory illnesses as well as allergies, and this can range from coughs to emphysema to asthma and even cancer. So breathing in toxic substances have direct effects on the lungs as well as the rest of the body parts, because the lungs are the primary organs that receive the air, and then the air is then through the blood carried to other parts of the body. So when you breathe in toxic substances, it will have effects on the lungs as well as the rest of the body parts. Then there are many solutions to air pollution, some which are national as well as individual basis. But as an individual, you should make sure that you do all that is in your power to make sure that there is less or minimal air pollution. God has made us stewards of the environment, and we should do all that is in our power to preserve our air. So let's take an active part in preserving our environment. As we keep the environment will keep us. And lastly, we'll talk about a spiritual application. In talking about prayer, Miss Ellen White said, prayer is the breath of the soul. So in as much as you cannot survive without air, as a Christian, you cannot also survive without prayer. You cannot stand for more than an hour without prayer. We should always be men and women of prayer, for this is where our safety lies. More prayer, more power. Less prayer, less power. So this is the end of our lesson. I hope you have learned something. Thank you for your attention.